Now that the verdict has been read, we're going to look toward what's next, his sentencing and beyond. The verdict, although it's been partially read, it's not quite over. Joining us now is trial attorney and litigator Rich Schoenstein. Rich, thank you so much for the time. I know that you have so much experience in this field, much more than any of us do. Is this rare? It seems crazy to me that they're delivering a partial verdict. They don't want to keep deliberating on the third charge. They have to. Walk us through what happened.
Yeah, this is really rare. I will say that. So you have here, I think we're on the fourth day of deliberations, or I may have missed a day, but we're well into deliberations. And the jury essentially said, we have agreed on 2 of the 3 counts. On one of the counts, we find him guilty. On one of the counts, we find him not guilty. And on the third count, we haven't been able to reach a decision. And remember, each count basically is a different victim. Mm-hmm. So it's not a situation where they're finding him guilty of a lesser included charge or one charge and not a higher charge. This is just a different decision with respect to each of 3 women. One they decide guilty, one they decide not guilty, and one they haven't reached a verdict yet, and they have to come back again tomorrow to see if they can do that.
Well, and the reason they're coming back tomorrow is because the judge told the court everyone needs to cool off. And that is, of course, because of this drama with the jurors. Twice now, a juror, even the foreperson, has gone to the judge saying, I'm being bullied. I don't want to change my mind. I can't go back in the jury room, things like that, to which obviously Weinstein's defense is extremely offended. Arthur Aidala said he was disgusted that this was not just being thrown out entirely. The judge called it schoolyard antics. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, Arthur Aidala is a great defense lawyer. And on the one hand, if you ask him what time of day it is, he responds, mistrial. He's constantly asking for a mistrial. Yeah. But he's right to be concerned about this. I mean, these are very serious allegations from inside that jury room, you know, of misconduct, of jurors exerting unfair pressure on really kind of abrasive discussions in the jury room. And he's right to be concerned about that. He's right to press the judge on the issue. And you better believe he's going to have an appeal from any guilty conviction that's rendered. I don't know if the appeal will be successful, but he certainly has a basis to pursue an appeal for any conviction here.
I wanted to ask you also, for our viewers watching, can you explain what an Allen charge is? The judge said that he may charge the jury or instruct the jury with an Allen charge. What does that mean?
An Allen charge, we also sometimes call it a dynamite charge. It basically is the final emphatic charge you give to the jury about their duty to render as best they can a unanimous decision, the importance of rendering unanimous decision. And generally, when you get down the road in long deliberations and you have a jury telling you they can't come to a verdict, a judge will give that instruction, give them one more chance, and if they still can't reach a verdict, if they still don't have unanimity, then you have a hung jury, then you have a mistrial.
Okay, thank you. That makes it much more easy to understand. What kind of sentence could Weinstein realistically face? Let's say, theoretically, he's found guilty on just the one charge of the Criminal Sex Act. What are we looking at as far as adding to his prison sentence?
So I don't know exactly. I didn't break it down. I think the combined sentence they were talking about was in the neighborhood of 23 years. I think criminal sexual conduct here, which would be the charge, carries a pretty significant jail penalty, but I don't know exactly how long. Okay. I do know, though, you know, he's already in jail for the California conviction, which he's appealing.
Right.
Given his age and health, it's a very serious concern for him.
And I want to ask your opinion on this. Does the case set any new precedent in how courts handle testimony from prior bad acts witnesses? Talk to me about what you think about that.
Well, the precedent was set by the appellate court the last time around, because in the first trial, they allowed testimony by other alleged victims, which was sort of used to pile on to paint a picture of Harvey Weinstein as a repeat predator. And the appellate court found that that was improper, that those women were not victims alleged in the case, and those prior bad acts were too attenuated. There is so much case law in New York and many other states about prior bad acts. It's very fact specific. So I don't think we created any new law, but it was a very significant development, of course, in this case.
Yeah, of course. And what about timing? The 2020 case did not take this long, and it came back with a pretty definitive verdict. Is it harder to prove a case the longer time goes on between the first time you try it and now this retrial?
Yeah, legal proceedings are much more like fish than they are like wine. They get a lot worse with age. Any distance you put from the alleged act creates a proof problem, creates a reliability problem. Witnesses become unavailable or their memories fade. The evidence is stale. It's not the same kind of evidence 10 years ago as you would have if something was happening right now. So it's much more difficult to prosecute an old case. It just is.
Rich Schoenstein, thank you so much for helping us understand the legalities of what happened today, making it so easy for our viewers to understand. We really appreciate your time.
Happy to do it. See you soon.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
All right, let's get right to it. Weinstein is found guilty on one count, then you have the no verdict on another, and then acquitted on the third. So what does that split decision really say about the jury's view of this evidence?
So this case is 3 different counts for 3 different women, 3 different alleged victims. And it was entirely possible that the jury might conclude one thing about one of the alleged victims, something different about the second, and something different about the third. It's not a case where they've decided guilty to a lower charge or a lesser offense. They've simply decided guilty on one of the 3 stories, not guilty on a second story, and the third one still being considered.
Interesting. Now, moving forward, could prosecutors retry that undecided decision, and would that be a risky or a smart move?
Well, we're not to that yet. First of all, the judge would have to declare a hung jury and a mistrial, and that's not what the judge is doing. The judge is having the jury come back tomorrow for further deliberations on that second count. So they have a guilty verdict on the first count, a not guilty verdict on the third count, which can't be retried once you get a verdict of not guilty, but no verdict yet. If that ends in a hung jury, then in theory it could be retried by the prosecutors.
Sure. Rich, what do you make of the behind-the-scenes courtroom drama that we have seen unfold before this partial verdict came down?
I think it's troubling. I think what we've heard from this jury in terms of acrimony, in terms of divisiveness, and people trying to exert their influence in the jury room, I think it's fodder for appeal, to be quite candid about it. I think whatever verdict comes against Harvey Weinstein in this case, there's going to be a live appeal based just on what has happened in these deliberations. It's surprising to me that it's taken so long. And I've heard a lot of stuff that I don't really like in terms of how the jury deliberations have gone.
Sure. How does today's outcome, I guess, affect Harvey Weinstein's overall legal future moving forward?
Well, it's a bad outcome for him. Any guilty verdict in the state of New York subjects him to a sentence and imprisonment here. I know he has that California conviction already, and he's serving time on that, although he has an appeal pending in California. You know, if he gets another guilty verdict in New York, the chance of him spending the rest of his life in prison, unfortunately, increases substantially.
Interesting. I guess in terms of leaving it here, talking about the Me Too movement as he was a fixture of, what does this partial verdict do to solidify the broader message of accountability moving forward in this Me Too movement?
Well, I think that it's a continuation of accountability. It would have been perhaps perceived as a setback if he was acquitted 5 years after having been convicted at what we all think was the start of the Me Too movement. So it won't be a setback if he's convicted of at least some of these crimes. But I remind everybody, Sean Combs is on trial down the street also for crimes, you know, at bottom, crimes against women. So the idea, this accountability, this is still alive and well in this country. There has not been a death to the Me Too movement yet.
Sure, the spotlight on both of those high-profile cases. Rich, we certainly appreciate you joining us and breaking this down for us. Thank you again.
Great to be here.